right, welcome to Science of Slink, the evidence-based pulp podcast, with me, your host, Dr. Rosy Boa. And today I have a guest that I actually don't think needs an introduction, but I'm going to introduce you anyway. I, if you don't already know who Roz the Diva, Roz Mays is, I'm excited for you because she is a beacon in the pole community. Definitely someone that I really appreciate and have certainly learned from as an instructor. And I wanted to let you also introduce yourself a little bit. So, Roz, tell us about yourself and tell us a little bit about your pole and your larger fitness journey as well. Because I think, like a lot of folks, you started with pole and that was sort of your gateway. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself, your experience, and your pole journey?
Thing. So, first of all, thank you for having me. Second of all, I'm Roz. I am 41. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. Woohoo! And I have been doing pole for 18 years. So, long, long damn time. And I've been teaching pole out of those 18 years. I've been teaching pole for almost 15 years now. And like you mentioned, pole was my gateway drug into doing fitness as a full-time career. And that's been going on for quite a few years now. And I started pole because it was just a class on the gym schedule. And I thought, wow, this sounds pretty cool. Let me give it a shot. And holy shit, did I give it a shot? And sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse
Oh,
here.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, good. So I thought, holy shit, this is the hardest thing I've ever done with my body. But it was also, I couldn't lift my arms for a week after class. I was tired. I had no core. I was hungry. But it was also the best time I'd ever had being tired and hungry and sore after the gym. So that's what pole meant to me in the early days. And that's why I stuck around with it, because it was a good time failing. And I also had a history, like when I was younger, I played soccer and softball all through middle and high school. I had a good time doing both, but there's also, both of those have a running component to them. And me and running never got along. It was always seen as like something. I was just never good. I was never fast. I was never quick. I was never agile. Especially living in a plus size body, running was difficult, very difficult for me. And there was no fun in it. So when I found pole, it was like, oh, this is a sport that has nothing to do with speed and it has nothing to do with running laps around the gym. I could get behind this. And so that's kind of how I got started with pole. And so, like I mentioned, pole was my gateway drug into doing fitness as a full-time career. Pole started as a hobby, then it moved on to a side hustle, and then it became my full-time hustle. And I knew I couldn't make a living in New York City just based on pole dancing alone. So that's when I got my personal training certification. And I've been personal training clients for roughly 10 years now. And that's been going well. I love doing that. I love working with different kinds of bodies and different kinds of people. And more than anything, just helping the underdog feel like they belong in the fitness world.
Yeah, yeah, it's so important. And I think it's something that, I don't know, because that would have been like what, 2011 in-ish there. It's about when you started teaching pole was about when I started doing pole. And that was at a time when there was sort of, I would say, a wider, some might say acceptance, some might say co-option of, body positivity and body neutrality. And more proactive space creation for a wider range of bodies in fitness. Not that it's ever been like amazing, but it was
Mm.
better. And I certainly in the pole space, I definitely think that's something that you've done a lot for. And we'll dig into that in a little bit. But I unfortunately seeing, and maybe you've also experienced this, a little bit of a swing the opposite way and a return to diet culture, and a return to trying to make bodies the same cookie cutter shape. And As an instructor, I think that's deeply harmful to students and also just been a even for myself, right? It's just like a struggle to get online and people being like, you have to be thin forever. And I grew up in the 90s. That was very much the milieu at that time. Yeah. So all of that, I'm going back to the strange tangent that I had to say, like I said, I think that you have really been instrumental in making the pole community more accepting. I won't say that overall the industry is inclusive because unfortunately it just isn't, but it's gotten better. And I would love to hear a little bit more about the work that you've done there and then some of the challenges that you faced, both as a student who maybe, accommodations that you weren't given that now as an instructor with a lot more knowledge you probably would. And also as an instructor, what are some hurdles that you've noticed your students running into that you've helped them over?
Sure. So I grew up grew up on the pole. I was already a grown ass human, but grew up on the pole with some of the best instructors that existed. One of the reasons why I hold them so dearly to me is because they didn't let me use my weight as an excuse not to try. And that was big because there were times where I would look at movements and I would say, there's no way I can get my body into that. Like, what's the point? And I was still expected that I was going to at least try to get some version of that movement. And that was big because now with my own students, I expect them to try in some capacity. Even if they get step one out of step 50, then I still expect them to try. So shout out to all my New York pole instructors. And with my students, I did not set out necessarily to represent or to teach or to specialize in teaching plus size bodies. But that's what ended up happening because I've almost always been the largest person in the room during fitness. And it hasn't stopped me, but I'm the exception to the rule that, I just kind of accepted I'm going to be the slowest person. I'm going to be the biggest person because I was always used, that's just how I grew up, was being the slowest and the biggest. It didn't stop me from participating in sports, but there was always I always felt like there was a limit to how much I could contribute meaningfully because I was slower and bigger, particularly because I was bigger. And I never, ever had any or saw any female athletes my size growing up. And I really wish that I had. I think it would have had a profound impact on my self esteem and on the way that I valued myself as an athlete. If I had seen different women and girls doing different kinds of sports, I didn't know I was allowed to be strong. I did not know that strength was a thing until pole really came around, and that it's using a lot of your own body weight to do stuff. Using pretty much all your body weight to do things. So that was also a significant moment, like an aha moment for me. And then, but going back to like my students, while I didn't set out to represent or to specialize in teaching plus size students, that's what happened because I myself am plus size. And there's not a lot of us in leadership positions. There are very few of us in any sort of leadership position. So my students would tell me, they would come sometimes from over an hour away for class. And I'm like, there's got to be a class closer to you. Why are you coming to my class? And they would tell me, well, because you look like me, I'm not the only person in the room now who looks like me. And if you can do it, then I can do it. And so that's how we got started building this kind of plus size coalition and bringing it back to pole. I started with dangerous curves in 20, I believe it was, the August of 2011. It was the first plus size pole dancing competition that existed, and to my knowledge, at least, it was the first one. And I had people from 6 different states come and be a part of the show. And that was a really big deal for me because it was just kind of like something we did in the studio. And it was pretty awesome. And so that was another big moment for me. And I guess really kind of for the industry too, since there was so many different people that was a part of Dangerous Curves. And then I started teaching one of my signature workshops, which was coaching plus size pole dancers. And I've been teaching some iteration of that for at least 10 years, if not a little bit more. And it has evolved, it has changed, it has done all the things that you're supposed to do over the years. But that's where I'm at right now. And that's where I think I make the biggest impact is through helping other instructors learn how to work with larger bodies in pole. And that was a long winding answer. I hope people out there were able to follow that because I was barely following myself.
No, no, I think that was I asked you a long winding question. I think you hit all the highlights. Yeah. Yeah, something you said in there, you talked about really stuck out to me, and that's that you were allowed to be strong because the, sort of the aspects of fitness that you've discussed a lot have really been around, speed, agility, athleticism. And of course, frequent listeners to the podcast know this. There are other ones as well, right? We've got like balance, we've got flexibility, we've got strength, all these different sort of aspects of being able to do things in your body. And that, especially thinking about what body types, right? What body shapes, what body, sort of the everyone's body is going to be a little bit different, right? Different sports are going to place different demands on the body. Some body shapes are going to show up more in higher levels of some sports than others. So, for example, thinking about like shot put, if you watched women's shot put at the last Olympics, really just physically powerful women, just, giving it their all, but a very different body shape from, let's say, the marathon runners, right?
Yes.
And partially that's like what you're doing, but partially that's also your body shape. And thinking about like what do we feel, particularly, as women, what do we feel allowed to do? What do we feel allowed to explore? What are sort of the societal pressures? And I think that pole can be a place of real rebellion against that. Not just, sort of the taboo, sex work aligned nature of the movement, right? Which is certainly part of it, certainly part of the appeal, but also being able to do things with our body that are not, you know, 4 hours of cardio.
Yes, definitely the strength aspect, the pulling myself up, the climbing the pole, swinging physically around the pole, all of that was a big reason why I stayed with pole is because I never used my body in those capacities before. And it was new, it was very hard, but it was also just very like interesting and fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I likewise when I started, everything was hard. I mean, I think unless you were coming to pole from, I guess like circus, you were already doing a bunch of aerial. I think for most of us, our first pole class was just really fucking hard. It's a
Yep.
hard discipline. It's not easy. But I agree that part of the challenge, and part of what has kept me coming back to pole is also that like intellectual kind of puzzle solving part of it. Like how, okay, so I want to do this. How am I going to get there? And as a teacher, you get that even more because it's not just how am I going to get there, but how am I going to help everybody who's coming in with different backgrounds, different, abilities and focus. So I was talking to the camera there. Different abilities, different, which we talked about. Like I got some students that are super flexible. I don't know, students that are hypermobile, maybe too flexible, or some that are like very strong, or will have specific types of strength that are going to make some movements easier and not others. And really addressing that diversity of need and varying degrees of I don't know, just stuff that people are coming in with, right? Like everyone's got their own stuff going on and they're not going to have the same experience. I have found that as an instructor, that sort of like puzzle figuring out, okay, what are the pathways that are going to work for most people? And if there's somebody that it doesn't work for, how can I, adjust and change this to make sure that everyone is challenging themselves and doing fun, cool stuff and nobody just gets left alone in the corner of the classroom. I teach online, but like metaphorically, just left alone in the corner of the
Yes.
classroom because the teacher is maybe a little bit scared, doesn't feel prepared, I think takes the intellectual level and that sort of like figuring stuff out to do the next level because there's so many more things to fit together, puzzle pieces. Sorry, we're recording this in the morning for folks who are listening, so I've not yet had all my coffee. But Roz, I'm interested if that has also been your experience moving from doing in your body to teaching for other bodies.
Yes. So teaching is the greatest thing, one of the greatest things to ever happen to me. I did not know that I was supposed to be a teacher in this capacity until I started doing it. And I started teaching, like I said, it was February of 2011 when I started teaching. And I started because I was in a show, a local show in New York City, whole show, and somebody was opening a new studio and they saw me performing and they asked if I was a teacher or if I was interested in teaching after they saw me perform. And I jumped all over it. I'd been polling for about 3.5 years previously and didn't have any teaching experience, but was like dying, loved, was dreaming of getting in front of a classroom. And so I started in February 2011 at Sacred, which now unfortunately is closed, but still is going to hold a forever space in my heart because it was the first place that I was able to teach. And the first class that I ever taught was only supposed to be 30 minutes. It was kind of like a teaser class or meant to be a teaser class. And I definitely taught for an hour, if not a little bit more. And that was also foreshadowing the fact that I would hardly stick to a clock for most of my teaching. Now I'm much better. There's schedules, I can't just teach until I don't feel like teaching because there's classes that come after me and there's people that need the space. So I'm definitely like conscious of that. But before, when there was nothing else happening after my classes, man, oh man, we'd be dancing for like 2 hours at a time. We also, one of the reasons too, besides the fact that I just love teaching, we would have these long classes because we only had in the studio that I was at, we only had 4 poles. And we would have like 20 people show up to class.
Wow.
So, yes. So, this is also in the much earlier days before we realized that is far too many people to show up for a class. So, so I was like, well, listen, I don't want to turn anybody away. So, if you all want to rock with me for an extra half hour, whatever, I'll make sure everybody gets enough poll time. But you just got to be patient. And so that was like the deal that we all struck with each other. And it worked. And now I wouldn't have more than 2 people per poll, which is absolutely fine to have. But, before, but I think also because when I was a student starting out, we also had a limited number of polls and we would be sharing the polls with like 5, sometimes 6 people on a Friday night. And, now that seems crazy, but before that was perfectly normal for us. And because nobody wanted to leave the class. So we all just did what we had to do. We stuck it out. We hung out. We were just patient with each other and it worked. So that's kind of that was my introduction to poll sharing. And so that's what I continued doing for quite a while. And, teaching hits personally for me because I've always, as I've kind of hinted at previously in some of my answers to you, is that I've always felt like an outcast of sorts. And I felt like an underdog for sure. And felt that way being Black and being plus size, not being swift and agile. I always felt like there was only but so much positivity and progress I could bring to sports because of how my body was shaped. And I remember, even though nobody ever necessarily like teased me for my size, thank goodness, or, particularly mean things to me, I always said those things to myself. And I know what it feels like to feel like shit about your body. And I don't want other people feeling that same way. So that's been the biggest motivation that I have to my biggest motivation to help others feel less othery. I want them to understand the contributions that they can make to pole. And I want them to, or be beyond pole, right? But pole just, it's the sport of the day, sport of my day. So I want them to see that there's many ways to be a successful athlete, and that it doesn't have to just be the person that does the craziest tricks and the most wild body positions. There's so many ways to be successful, and I just want people to feel that success.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of the things you brought up are things that a lot of folks struggle with. And I'm curious, do you have any specific things that you did to help yourself get past that self-criticism?
I would say, I'm not sure if I'm past the self criticism, to be quite honest. I think I have learned to deal with it, and I try not to make decisions based on the negative self criticism, but I'm hesitant to say that I'm past it. Much to my dismay, I would love to say that I've figured out the secret to loving myself and loving one's body and that whole deal. But I'm very much still a work in progress. Work in progress. So, oh gosh, I think one thing that helped me though, pole dancing was incredibly helpful because in making progress with making peace with myself, because it wasn't about how I looked, it was about what I could. And thus far, as an adult, I'd started going to the gym and working out for aesthetic purposes. I wanted to lose weight primarily. And that was what got me into the gym, but it's not what kept me there. What kept me there, I think, a lot of it was pole dancing. And what kept me in the gym was having fun, first and foremost. And I think fun is really underrated as an adult, because as adults, we're not going to do shit that we don't want to and pay for it. Does this look like the dentist office? No. You should enjoy what you're doing. There'll be hard times, of course, but you should at least like what's going on. And because then you're more likely to stick with it. That was big. Also, in regards to my mental health and pole was very significant because I started doing pole on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening. Before pole, I would go to therapy. I'd go to therapy, and these were the early years of therapy, so they were just like ugly tears all the time about a whole lot of stuff. And so I would come out of therapy almost like in a daze, like anybody who's kind of been in almost like you're crawling out of a tear coma and you're just kind of like a little disoriented. Emotions are still flying all over the place, but therapy session is done. So you're trying to kind of get back to a homeostasis level. I would do pole afterwards, after therapy, and it helped me get back to that homeostasis level. I didn't, because it was somebody else. I didn't have to think that much, and I could follow along other people and they would take the lead. So I think that's how pole helped me heal from the inside out.
Yeah, I like that. Both I'm mentioning the social component, you're going and hanging out with other people. The fun component, you are having a nice time, you're doing something that you enjoy. Hopefully, if you're listening to this and you're doing pole, you're enjoying pole. And I'm just going to say flat out, I know it's both of our jobs. If you're not enjoying pole, you're allowed to quit.
Yes.
You can do that at any time.
100%.
And also the physical aspect, right? Like coming from, emotion brain and then back down into the body and really bringing that's something that's been really powerful for me as well, has been using pole as a tool to help notice and connect with my body because I'm sure like many of y'all, perhaps you as well, Roz, I'm an intellectualizer. I will think about my emotions a lot, and turns out that that's not actually super helpful.
I want a label for all of my emotions. I want to know where they came from. I want to know what's feeding them. I absolutely do all of that.
At some point, though, you do have to feel them, as it turns out. You can't think your way out of that. Dang it. So, I know we're coming up to the new year, getting there.
Mm.
As a fitness professional, and my studio specifically, I'm anti-diet. It's not a diet-friendly space. So I'm always this I know can be a challenging time for folks who are getting a lot of messaging around you should set New Year's goals and they should be about how to make your body smaller and different. And you should look like this other person that you are not. And I find this to be a challenging part of the year for just handling emotions around, a body's food, expectations, outside pressure. And I think that can also show up more than in other spaces, in fitness spaces. And I wonder if you have any things that you think about for setting your own goals or any recommendations you give to your students or your clients, of course, because you're your personal trainer as well, around setting goals aside from weight loss. And I understand some people may have weight loss goals, and that's perfectly fine. That's just, again, not something we do at my studio. I know that's like a huge can of worms that I'm just like opening and handing to you, but dig in there. Tell us what your worms are.
I'm here for it. So, like I mentioned a few moments ago, weight loss and the desire to be in a smaller body was what got me started in the gym in the first place, but it's not what's kept me there for nearly 20 years. I think goals are all right, but I also think they're partially overrated because I think with a fitness goal, the idea is that once you hit that goal, then what happens? So there's more to, oh, excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. There's more to fitness than reaching certain milestones, certain goals, and certain milestones, especially when it comes to, say, weight loss. And I have no problem with weight loss. I still wrestle with, do I want to lose weight? Am I going to make an effort to lose weight? And then sometimes I'm like, fuck that weight loss. I'm fine. But then other times I'm like, fuck me instead. So I got a lot of demons about my weight, admittedly. But I think I think setting goals can be helpful, definitely sometimes. One of the big goals that I'd set for myself over the last couple years was to deadlift 300 pounds. And what was nice about that, having that goal, is that it gave me a focus. It gave me something to do. It gave me something to work towards. And so on days when I either didn't feel like it or days when I did feel like it, I had a focus in the gym that was something beyond aesthetic. And so that was good. And it also gave me like directions like, all right, this is how I'm going to train. This is what I'm going to try to do because these are the skills that I need to, be able to deadlift 300 pounds. So that was cool. But for me personally, I remember once I reached that point, I deadlifted actually 305 pounds. And that was an enormous accomplishment. And I felt absolutely terrific about it. But I also, for me, I was like, all right, now I'm kind of done deadlifting for a while. So I took a break. I'm slowly getting back into it, probably like a year later, but it took quite a while for me to get back into it. So rather than have a goal that is one particular endpoint, I wonder if it would be more productive to have a goal that's like, let's enjoy the journey. And so there's no one endpoint. There's different things that you can, but you can still create a workout routine that is centered on joy and centered on happiness and centered on this is fun, fun, fun. So that's kind of how I see goal setting. I see goals as like they're cool sometimes and they can give you a lot of structure, but also for me, like once I hit my goals, I was like, all right, now that goal is dead to me. What do I do now? You can set more goals, but there's also, the feeling of constantly chasing something. And what happens if you never reach that goal? Is all of your time and effort, is it worth it otherwise? What's up? What's going on with that? So I'm a fan of light goals, uncomplicated goals, like I said, that focus on the journey rather than one particular outcome.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. And I'm starting to do business planning for next year, as I'm sure, but most people who run businesses do. Um, One thing that I've really been thinking about is what can I do to help myself stay focused? And if I focus on that thing, I will do more than I would have otherwise. And I think the sort of the I don't know if it's the goal, but like the guidance, right? Like thinking about, okay, I want to have fun. If I center that, what can I do that I wouldn't have otherwise? Or just like in my personal life, a big thing that I've been focusing on this year is I wanted to make more things like physically with my hands, and I've done a lot of things because I had that overall guidance. And when I was like, okay, I've got some free time, what do I want to do? I could be like, oh yeah, that's right. I had that thing that I wanted more of, so I'm going to focus on that. And I think that can be a really powerful tool. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Rob.
Sure, absolutely.
Speaking of endpoints, I've got one more question for you, and then we'll wrap up. Poll goals. One goal that I think a lot of folks have, and I know because my students bring it up quite a bit, is inverting and the basic invert. Which actually this month in my studio we're getting upside down, and I think we have talked about the basic invert one time in any of my classes, and we've been doing a bunch of other stuff as well. But I know that a lot of people do want to learn that. What are your just like quick and dirty basic invert tips for someone who's like, this is absolutely the thing that I want to do and I cannot be dissuaded from it?
Sure. So, recognizing with inverting specifically, you don't need to merely stand there and kick up to an invert. That is one way to get your ass over your head. Another way is to climb the pole and then drop into an inverted position. That is my that is how I have gotten into inverts since the beginning of time. There was a time where I was kicking up into my inverts, and that's absolutely fine, because that's a big deal when you're able to do that. But recognizing that that's merely one way. There's more ways than that to get the butt over the head. And it is one of the hardest things that you will ever ask someone to do, particularly plus sizers. It's going to be extra difficult for us, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means that it's going to take longer. I have come across people where it's taking them 3 or 4 classes to try to invert and they get it. And then I've also come across people where it's been 3 or 4 years and they're still working towards their invert. I would also take a step back from all this and I would ask them, why do they want to get a particular move like an invert? Are you doing it because you feel like you have to? Do you feel pressured to? Or is it something that you genuinely want to do? If it's something that you feel pressured towards doing and something that you don't really care that much about, don't do it. No worries. Who cares? This is your sport. But if it's something that you genuinely want to do for whatever reason, then give yourself a lot of time, especially if you're living in a marginalized body. Give yourself way more time than you expect, and that will go very far.
Yeah, I think that's all all very solid advice. And I think it took me a couple years, a couple years to start it.
Yeah.
And I was trying. Oh.
Yep.
All right. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. But before we wrap up, where can folks find you online? And is there anything that you'd like to pitch?
Sure. So people can find me at Roz the Diva. That's the Diva. And that's pretty much everywhere. I'm on Instagram. I have a newsletter. I have a website. I got the whole shebang bang. So definitely sign up for my newsletters so you'll find out where my workshops are going to be and where I'm traveling to next and what I'm up to. Follow me on Instagram for the day-to-day shenanigans of my life and showing a little couple like behind the scenes work. And then you can also slide in my DMs with any questions, any comments, or if you want me to come to your studio, please let me know. I'm now booking for 2026. So hit me up and let's rock together.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining today, Roz. Folks who are listening, I hope that you have taken away some little tidbits, some little pearls of wisdom to stick in your bag and pull out later. And I look forward to talking with y'all very soon in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.